Okay, we're here today at Brian Clogg's layout in Surrey, and we're going to spend some time with Brian, and he's going to walk us around and show us the British Columbia Railway. Brian, say hi to everybody.
Hello everyone.
Hello everyone. So, Brian, is that the name of the layout, the British Columbia Railway?
Yes, and it's the Squamish Subdivision.
Squamish Subdivision, so North Vancouver up to
Lillooet.
Now, it's only recently become the British Columbia Railway, hasn't it? What was it before?
Well, I was freelancing based on the British Columbia Railway. I called it the Coniferous Western Railway.
And how long ago did you start building that?
The concept started in a previous layout in 1980.
So this layout has actually been around for 35 years?
Yeah.
In some respects. Now, how long have you been actually in the current location?
It was 87.
87. And then I understand that you actually expanded the house as well to fit the layout?
Yes.
How much did you add on to the house?
Well, actually, if you talk to my wife, we expanded the house to build a deck and a family.
Ah, sorry. Yes, okay. So if your wife is watching this video, that's what we did. Right?
Yes.
Very good pointer.
Absolutely.
Good pointer. Make sure that you keep management on side.
Yes.
All right. So what we're standing in right now is the crew lounge.
That's correct.
And how often do you have operating sessions?
Once a month.
Once a month. And how many people show up for your sessions?
8 to 12.
8 to 12. And regular operators?
Yes,
and
there's actually two different groups that come over alternate months.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. And then how long do you operate for in a given session?
About 2.5 to 3 hours.
Have you always been into the operations side of the hobby?
It's grown and evolved over, say, the last 20 years.
Interesting. And what about the operations is it that you like?
It brings the railroad alive. It gives me a focus of what I'm doing this for. I have a bunch of friends over and we all enjoy something in common. The railroad is not a still life then, it's something alive.
Right. All right, so take us into the layout, and I'm just going to fire you questions as we go.
All right.
So first we've got this duck under thing here. So why did you have a duck under?
It's much more flexible in the track planning, otherwise you've got to have return loops.
Okay, and what's the height?
To the bottom of it is about 52 and a half inches.
52.5 inches. Does it pose much of a problem for people having a duck under?
Not really. The other key factor is how wide is it, how far do you have to step?
Right.
And it's only a few inches.
Oh, so it's just a short step.
Once I bend my knees, I don't have to step with my knees bent.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Yes. Good thing for people to take into mind. Did you consider any form of gate, and what steered you towards just a simple not under?
I had originally planned to build a gate here, and I found that I don't really need it.
Okay, well that's good to know. All right, so take us to the heart of the operations. Maybe we'll start at the southern end of the layout in North Van.
All right.
We're walking around. It's a double deck layout. And what heights are they generally for the double decks?
The lowest point is at North Vancouver. That's at 40 inches.
Yeah.
The highest point is at Lillooet. That's at 70 inches.
Right. So and it's a no-licks, right? So it actually continually rises through sections. So you actually don't have any helixes anywhere.
That's correct.
What a nice feature. I know having a two-turn helix on my main line, it's a 2 turns too many. If there's a way to get rid of helixes, that's a good idea.
I found that areas that you're modeling where it's supposed to be level, if you make the grade 0.5% to 0.75%, it doesn't really affect train lengths, but you can gain a lot of elevation if you have the main line run.
That's good to know. That's a very good point. All right, so Brian is taking us into the midst of his spiral layout. We're coming all the way into North Vancouver. Now, when did you start reconfiguring the layout from the Coniferous Western towards the BC Rail?
I started the planning in March of 2014.
And why did you decide to go down that path?
Well, in 1980, I had a lot of good reasons why I was going to freelance, but I woke up one morning in March and I realized all those reasons were gone. There was a lot of good models available that were accurate for BCR. I had a lot more information on the BCR than I had back then. And I find freelancing was a bit of a problem for me in trying to figure out what would have been there if this had been a real place.
It's easier in some ways to model the real thing than to have to create stuff.
Especially have pictures of things and the buildings, and you can just model the buildings.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I mean, We owe, definitely we owe a debt of gratitude to all the wonderful books that have been brought out about the prototypes that we model. So here we have, I believe this is south staging, is that right? And
Yes,
what does this
to the
represent?
right of what you're seeing to the right through the wall is where the south staging, it's just an area to stage trains where the yard is not as wide as the prototypes, so we can't keep so many trains in there.
And how many trains can you stage in there?
I have 6 tracks in there. The track closest to the wall on the left is the switch lead.
Okay, for
So
North
we don't
Vancouver.
yeah, and also the CN track there. That represents the connection to the Lynn Creek yard.
Oh, and there's another staging yard back down underneath there. That's the lead coming over there,
No,
where we
the
have that Canadian National Jeep on it, right?
Yes, that's a CN Lynn Creek yard staging track. On the prototype, they're end-to-end with an interchange yard in between them. We didn't have room for that here, so I did it this way. So the CN train will come out and push the cars into the yard and then pick up its block and then go back home.
As a transfer function.
Yes.
Now, who runs that during the operating sessions? The CN?
North Van Yardmaster will do
Okay.
that.
So walk us through North Van and how it would be operated, because now I can see it. Has this been recently reconfigured?
Yeah, there was nothing here before. I built this last summer in
So the summer
July,
of
August
2014?
14.
Yeah.
Now, North Vancouver Yard, if I was to model it accurately, would have to be about 10 feet wide. So a lot of the sidings are pushed to the ends where they should be out in the aisle here.
This is some pretty good shots of your bench work. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the bench work's built. Is it all 2x4s? Or most of it? Is that a stud wall that we have back there?
In the back there is a stud wall, which I put in, and it holds up the upper deck. And North Vancouver is
It's cantilevered out from it?
yes, and in the front by the fascia is a really long L girder with legs, and the joists sit on the legs, and then they're screwed to the stud wall in the back.
Okay. So is it open grid or is it an L girder construction?
It's L girder.
L girder construction. Okay. And then you use stud walls. Are all the peninsulas using stud walls?
Yes.
Okay. And did you do all that stuff by yourself or did you have help?
Mostly by myself.
Oh, good for you. That's a lot of work. So walk us through how is North Van operated, and how many yard crew will be here during an operating session?
There's usually one yardmaster will look after this. This is the terminal, so all trains that arrive here terminate. The cars will either go to CN via the train, or they will be spotted in local spots here. And there's somewhere about 50 spots for spotting cars.
Wow.
There's a lot of switching.
50 spots in North Van.
North Vancouver, yeah.
Wow, that's huge, and that can all be done by a single yardmaster. How many trains originate and terminate here during a session?
During a session, we're sort of trying a new idea, but we usually have 5 or 6 trains. It depends whether the passenger train is starting here or whether it's starting in Little.
Okay.
That depends on what time of day it is.
5 or 6 originating, or 5 or 6 originating and or departing? Is it total trains?
5 or 6 originate in Vancouver.
So that he's got to build, or she has to build 5 or 6 trains per session, as well as switching the 50 spots. So North Van will originate 5 or 6 trains per day, and they will depart northbound here.
Yes,
And I'm presuming that it goes through there and quickly comes over to the other side of the aisleway. Is it a, I guess, what do they call it? They call it a sincere track plan, where the tracks only pass through the scene once per time. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you always follow your train, so we don't have any tracks puncturing peninsulas and you have to jump peninsulas. You always follow your train.
That's correct. And north is always to your left on this road.
Well, that's nice. That's a nice feature. Okay, so what are we seeing? We're seeing...
This is the siding at Brunswick.
Okay.
There's a couple of bridges. The mountain comes right down beside the track, and then there's bridges that let creeks underneath, so I hope to model the two.
Okay. Now, if you've changed things as we're going around, please point out where you changed things and why, because I think it'd be very helpful to understand, given the layout has been around for 25 plus years, I think it'd be really helpful to understand, you know, what you've learned in that period and what you could share with people.
Well, this area here used to be my imaginary town of Roberts Bay, and there was nothing like that on BCR. Plus, it was too wide for me to put North Van and have sufficient aisle space. So I just took it out and put a prototypical siding Brunswick.
Ah, speaking of aisle space, what is the aisle space that we're seeing here? Is that about 24 inches?
Something like that, yes.
Is that the tightest spot on the layout, or?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get as much yard as I can and still allow people to go through.
How have you found the aisle spacing? Has 24 been adequate?
Well, most aisles are 3 foot, and some of them, the aisle beside North Van is about 39 inches, which seems to work. The other issue we have here for aisle space, of course, is the upper deck. We have Mons, and people need to work that also. So there's another person in the aisle.
Okay, let's keep walking. So we're now entering the second aisleway.
So this Brunswick siding continues here. It's fairly long. It's handy to have meets. We keep trains out of North Van.
What's the length of the siding in cars?
And
or feet, or what, however you refer to it.
I would have to refer to my sheet.
Okay. All right, so we'll keep...
My recollection, it's about 1,300 and something feet.
Okay. So we're flowing along. One of the nice things about the L girders, you have nice flowing fascia and valances.
It works for me, but there's more than one way to build a layout.
While we're here, let's talk about the lighting, because I know that you and I have gone back and forth about the pros and cons of different lighting. So here we can see, and it's tube fluorescent. What are the pros? What are the cons? What would you do differently, if anything?
Well, initially I selected fluorescents because I naively thought they would produce less heat, and maybe they do, but especially the old ballasts produce a lot of heat, so it does get fairly warm in here. But I wanted sort of a linear light, especially under the upper deck, that would match the lighting in the room. And
so you've got the same tubes under there.
Well, the newer ones, of course, are T8, and they're not as hot.
Would you, so it works for you, and then I know you've had some issues with heat. What have you been doing recently about heat extraction?
Well, recently I've been taking the upper deck lighting out and putting lights in the middle of the aisle. One issue with light over the fascia is that you get shadows in the front.
Right.
And if the lighting is in the aisle, then the light shines on both sides, and you eliminate those shadows. The only question whether it's bright enough. If it's not bright enough, then put in a 2-tube fixture.
Two-tube fixtures. All right, let's continue our tour. So we're reaching the end of the aisleway, and we're going to swing around. This is going to be an open scene here. Is this going to be like a canyon?
Yes, I hope to model scenes on the house out.
Okay.
So as you come around,
beautiful.
we're now coming to Porto.
Yep. So this is all going to be oceanfront here, oceanfront cliffs.
Yes.
Wow, that's going to be very impressive.
At least as you go further north. This is fairly accurate for how this Porto was. In my era, there was a spur here where they loaded ballasts, so we've modeled that.
Okay.
And that gives the North Van switcher another spot to work.
Oh, so the North Van switcher runs all the way out here?
Yes, it runs to Squamish and then goes back to...
So it's the terminology. So it's not actually the yardmaster. It's a separate crew.
But one unprototypical thing that I can't find in any pictures of Porto is this great big plastic pipe in the middle of the ocean.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Now that I've called attention to it, I hope to deal with it by ignoring it.
I think they put it in when they revamped the Sea to Sky Highway.
Okay,
that's why
part of the pier.
It's supporting the highway, right? 40% of it is supported over nothing, so I think that's what they use is plastic pipes. Good point.
Porto is a fairly short siding, so the dispatcher has to pay attention to what trains he puts in there.
All right, so we're continuing. Okay, so around the corner.
And this will be along hugging the mountain.
Very impressive. I mean, here your prototype is definitely working in your favor with the beautiful cliffs.
Yes.
All right, what are we reaching here?
Now, this is Britannia on the railway. It was never served by the railway.
Massive oversight.
It was a copper mine, and they would ship ore out by barge. They would send rail car barges up, and they would load Milwaukee Road hoppers directly from the mine into the hoppers on the barge.
Interesting.
I went to Tacoma where the smelter was.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Now, I have to ask about the trees, because obviously modeling the West Coast, you're going to need tens upon thousands of trees, and I see a whole selection back here. Could you walk us through a little bit about your thoughts on trees?
Well, these ones here are my form of deciduous trees, and those are based on the super trees. I just spray them and sprinkle on medium ground foam and then hit them with hairspray.
What do you spray them with first? Hairspray, or you use adhesive?
I use a gray spray paint.
A gray spray paint. And then do you use adhesive before you put on the foam, or you use hairspray?
I just sprinkle, while the glue is wet, I sprinkle on the ground foam.
Okay.
And then the hairspray over top of it really helps to seal it in so that it doesn't...
Very nice. And how long does it take you to make each one, roughly, do you think?
Well, the first step I need to do when it comes out of the bag is to soak it in matte medium. Otherwise it's too brittle, and then hang them to dry. So that takes a couple of minutes per tree. And then to spray it and get it to how it looks here is maybe a minute per tree.
So under 5 minutes per tree kind of thing.
Yes.
Now you have this huge bank of coniferous trees. It looks like you got a couple of different kinds here. Maybe you could walk us through what we're seeing.
Well, these ones are a recent experiment. I bought some from Grand Central Gems to see how they would look on the railroad. And they're not bad, because you can imagine to make 10,000 trees takes a little bit of time.
Yes, I can imagine 10,000 trees times 5 minutes. A lot of time. Actually, those are deciduous trees, but I can't imagine coniferous is going to be much shorter. So those are Grand Central. And now roughly how much are those each?
Oh boy, there was 15 trees for like $20 Canadian.
Oof. Oh boy, and probably more now with Canadian dollar. And then what do we have over here?
Well, these are the ones I make myself, and that is twisted up with hanger wire and jute twine.
Yep.
And then they're sprayed black and the ground foam sprinkled on and hit with hairspray.
And they look really good in a group.
Then the last step is I use floral tape for trunks where I need them.
Wow, and roughly how long do you think it takes to do each coniferous tree?
Maybe under 2 minutes, maybe.
2 minutes. Wow, that's fast. Good for you. Now, do you use a special machine to twist the wires, or do you just do it in a drill?
I cut lengths of wire and I loop them over once, double them over on themselves, and then at the closed end I clip on a vice grip. The other end I stuff the twine into between the wires, and then I chuck the other end into a drill and just twist them.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's continue. So we're continuing along. What are we seeing here?
Okay, this is the south end of what I used to call Garibaldi.
And it is
this
now...
will change a little bit. You're seeing what I called house sound terminals, which is based on Squamish terminals. So now it's going to become Squamish terminal, but it's really not. It has to be reconfigured a bit, and it'll be switched from the left instead of the right.
Okay. So this is a holdover from the old layout, but you're going to configure it to be more prototypical.
That's correct.
Okay, so what are we seeing around the corner?
This is part of the yard at Garibaldi. This is a big industrial area, and
wow, a lot of track.
After the transition, it will become the Squamish industrial area, which in '82 is a pretty busy place.
How many industry spots are here?
I can't remember. There's quite a few.
It looks like it would keep someone busy for a whole session.
It generally does, depending on how many cars are on the train.
Okay.
So this will become the Squamish Industrial. There's the town spur, there's the spur to the docks, and there's a south yard with a couple of spots. So that should hopefully be enough. The Weldwood is down the other end. So this is a work in progress, the transition is into Squamish.
Is it reasonable to assume that that would occupy someone for a whole operating session?
I think so.
Pretty close.
Usually modelers license to put every industry that was in there.
That you could ever think of.
And make it too busy for what the prototype was.
Now we're coming into a major yard.
Now this is Squamish.
What happens at Squamish?
This is two trains, two locals originate here every day. As well, there's north and southbound cuts of cars which are swapped. In other words, the southbound will bring a block of cars for the Squamish and take away, well, the northbound will take away cars for Lillooet.
And this is a dedicated operator as well?
Yes, there's a Yardmaster Works Squamish. There's a few industries in here. Now the cut of cars in the front is the Garibaldi switcher ready to go for the next session. And next to it is a block of cars going north, so the northbound train will stop and pick those cars up and add it to his train.
It looks like there's a lot of classification capacity here.
Yes.
Do you need all of it?
I did at one point when we ran more trains. Now that we're a BCR, I don't need as much. And actually, the real Squamish does not have a classification yard.
Right.
And also, there's a big shop area I need to put in, so that'll probably go where
over here,
where the classification yard is now.
Now, you mentioned that you've got the Garibaldi switcher ready to go, and the one in the front here.
Yes.
Is it common that you pre-stage trains before an operating session?
It has been.
And what is the benefits and what are the cons of doing something like that?
Well, the big reason I wanted to do it that way was so that when my guests show up, there's something for everyone to do right away.
Rather than waiting around.
I'm trying to change that a little bit now, where the train you see here was made up by the last Yardmaster.
Make up the trains for the next day.
That's correct. Instead of spotting cars on the classification yard.
You're right.
So this is all ready to go, as well as the north block. I didn't touch anything here this time. So we run continuously. So in other words, when the session ends, we don't put all our trains away. We just pick up where we left off next time we come to operate.
Does that simplify your staging?
Yes. Okay. I found this time it saved me a lot of time. Plus it gives more prototypical work for the Yardmaster.
And it's different every time. Yeah. We're leaving northbound out of the Squamish Yard.
Now, as we're coming around, we're getting into Cheakamus Canyon, and this was...
Look at all the trees. That must have taken some time.
Trees disappear when you start planting them in scenery.
Yeah, one of the benefits of having very narrow benchwork, but then you don't get the opportunity to have such big vistas like this.
Now this was designed to be like the prototype, and it scales out about 2/3 the size of the prototype. So this is the only bridge I've finished. That's the 54.5-mile bridge. On the prototype it's a 50 and an 80 foot, and we've modeled it with a 30 and a 50 foot.
What did you use for the piers, if I might ask? The piers and the abutments?
AIM. Cast plaster.
Very nice. Nice coloration.
The abutment on the left was just built with styrene and an AIM pier to be a little more like the prototype.
Where did you get the plans, or did you actually hike down into the canyon and get measurements, or just do it from photos?
So I think one of the BCR modelers sent me plans.
Wow, that's very impressive. Okay. Scenery construction techniques is cardboard lattice, hot glue, and
That's
what do you
the way
put
I
over it?
learned back in the day, and it worked for me.
And then you put a plaster impregnated gauze over top? Or is it a hard shell of some form?
Well, the next stage, which you don't see here, is cover with brown construction paper.
Okay.
Which I hot glue here and there. It gives me the shape. And then it's paper towels with
Paper towels with plaster.
Hydrocal.
Oh, hydrocal, okay. Alright, so we're climbing. Climbing. Your backdrop is... Here is it right on the wall?
Aluminum.
Aluminum.
Back
Wow.
in the day I was in the business and I was able to get a long roll.
And so what gauge is it? 20 gauge?
018.
018. Wow. And did you need help to put the aluminum in?
I did have help, yeah.
And then it's
pretty
just a latex paint fading out to white at the horizon line.
That's correct.
Did you use a roller for that?
Yes, and I did the blending with a brush.
Nice. Very nice. Alright, there's our duck under. It brings us to the town of...
This is the town of Clogg, which is the land of make-believe, because this was a holdover from the freelance days, and there is a town of Clogg on the BCR, but it looks nothing like this. And I'm just leaving this because there's a lot of work here, and people enjoy it, and it's a fun town to switch. There's
Absolutely.
spots here.
It's your railroad.